variety of sources. Some tell me there are, in fact, extraterrestrial vehicles up at the test site. Some tell me that there are not. So what I say is, you know, I try to file everything and believe nothing.
Mm-hmm. Well, my listeners are certainly used to hearing that, because my admonition to them is to listen to everyone, read everything, believe in nothing until they can verify it for themselves.
Well, I think that's very sound advice, and it's advice that I try to follow.
Well, in a period of time when there's so much disinformation and manipulation in an effort to tear down the sovereign status of nations and bring about a one-world government, it's difficult at best, even if you spend all of your time digging for the truth, to really know when you've reached it. And I think everybody had better begin to understand that. John, what are some of the more memorable moments in your dealings with this UFO business that you can remember? Some of the characters, or some of the stories, or maybe we can inject a little bit of humor into this before we get a little more serious.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to think. I think one of the more memorable times was when I first got into this and had read a book called Communion. And it was very interesting. As a matter of fact, I read it on a flight that I flew from Las Vegas to Cleveland. And when I got to Cleveland, I couldn't put the book down. And after I did put it down, I couldn't go to sleep. And for some reason, I felt this was something real that was going on. And I'd heard of this guy, Bud Hopkins. And I was based in New York at the time, so I gave him a call. And he said, yeah, come on down. And I went down to his apartment in Manhattan, and we sat around for about 3 or 4 hours listening to some of the tapes that he recorded of people who had thought that they had been abducted. Now, you know, whether these were true or not, I don't know, but the people who were talking certainly felt it was true. Mm-hmm. And some of these stories they told were so poignant, so essentially horrifying, of some of the things that happened to him. It just made a real impression on me when I was first got into this. It's the first time I heard of these kinds of stories, and sitting there with Bud was, I can't say it was memorable. It sure was, and it made an impression on me. Another of the times was I was acquainted with a scientist here in Las Vegas. His name was Bob Lazar, who claimed to work at the test site. And one night he took us out to see one of the alleged test flights of these vehicles. He said it was going to fly just after sunset. This was March 22nd, 1989. We went out there, parked our vehicle, and sure enough, about 15 minutes later, this orange glowing disc rises up from behind the mountains and performs a few maneuvers and then goes back down. I thought that was pretty spectacular. Bob said it was extraterrestrial, since I have no way of knowing whether it was extraterrestrial or man-made. You know, I can't really, you know, comment on what it was. It was just spectacular that this thing came up, made no noise, and flew around at tremendous speeds, and then went back down. That was a pretty memorable moment.
Well, I can vouch for that. And it is memorable when you see it. I've been out there many times and have actually spent weeks in the desert filming these things, and I've made 2 video documentaries of these craft actually in flight over the test site, and it is amazing to stand there and see them and know that this is a technology that's been completely hidden from the public, and it's in the possession of secret agencies of the United States government. And who cares whether it's extraterrestrial or man-made? I tend to think that it's man-made myself. But it represents a different science that could possibly benefit mankind greatly. And I think that it's a crime to keep this kind of a thing hidden. And they are disc-shaped, and they do things that are incredible. I don't know if you ever witnessed this, John, but I have literally seen them disappear from the sky. I mean, they're not there anymore. And then reappear, sometimes seconds, sometimes minutes later, sometimes in the same spot, and sometimes several miles away. Have you ever witnessed that type of behavior?
No, I've never seen that myself, but I've talked to enough people who've seen those kinds of disappearances, and I hardly agree with you that we don't know whether that particular disc that I saw was man-made. There certainly are man-made ones that perform with equal speed and dexterity, and I have reason to believe that we were much further ahead in the late 50s than the public was led to believe when Vanguard was blowing up for every flight on the Canaveral pad. I think that we were very far advanced in our modes and method of travel. I have reason to believe that we were on the moon in the late 50s. And, one of the interesting things that Dr. Werner von Braun said at his retirement party in the middle 70s was he made a cryptic statement. He said, it's too bad Vanguard had to be the scapegoat. And I think what he was telling us was that he was part of a program that was so far advanced, but his name was associated with Vanguard, and all people remember is that thing kept blowing up on the pad, going up 20 feet, and exploding and toppling over, and I think that's what he was referring to.
Well, I think that was to keep the public's attention. It's well known amongst those who really do real research, and most researchers or people who call themselves researchers don't even know what the word means. But there are several references in several books and texts that are not well known to the public that disclosed the existence of a secret space program that even had a director of space and was administered mainly under the Navy, Department of the Navy, through DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. And the public, of course, was told that NASA was the only space program when in fact Eisenhower had established this secret space program by executive order in the early 50s. What have you learned about that, John?
Along the same similar lines, as a matter of fact, to keep it secret, I think that between 1955 and 1958, it was illegal to mention the word space in any publications in the United States. They were so afraid that the public would find out how far along they were, and only with the advent of Vanguard and that were these horrible examples of our technology were being shown to the public so that they would think that there's no possible way that we could have advanced like we did. And so I agree with you. There certainly was a secret program going on at that time.
Well, what brings the development of technology really home to me is my great-grandmother, who was no longer living, but I remember as a boy she would tell me stories of her trip across the United States from the East Coast in a covered wagon. And her first home on the West Texas prairie was a dugout with a sod roof. And she told me stories of the Indian Wars and all kinds of things. And she lived to see the development of the Boeing 707 and all the modern accoutrements of our society today. And I was always dumbstruck by this. I just could not imagine how people who went through that much of a transition in technology in their life could even keep their sanity, much less understand what was happening. Your father made a lot of references, and I understand that he was on a television show or something. Was it in the 60s, John?
The late 50s, in a press conference, I think it was from Colombia. It was from South America, that flying saucers are real and they were piloted by highly intelligent beings. Is this the one you're referring to?
Well, that's one, but the one I was more specifically referring to was the statement he made on television. Someone asked him, and I think it was on television, I'm not sure, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but someone asked him on television, since he was involved in the defense industrial establishment, just exactly where was the state of technology and what could we expect to see within the next 5 or 10 years. And the quote that I have is he said that you would be able to get into a phone booth in Los Angeles and step out in New York City.
Yeah, that's correct. I think that happened in the late 50s. It was a television or radio program. I can't remember what.
Well, isn't that's a lot of people don't pay